principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? It's Tuesday. Why, that's weird. You're not getting the audio of the music from the beginning of the show, and I'm not sure why. Anyway, we'll not solve it now. Next time we do a show, I'll struggle to figure that one out. All right, welcome. I am traveling. I'm in San Francisco, which is it's weird because I came from Puerto Rico, flying west earlier in the week, or at the end of last week. I came from Portugal, flying west. So I flew from Portugal to Puerto Rico. The time difference there is 4 hours. And then today I flew in jet lag and all of that. And then today I flew from Puerto Rico to the West Coast, 4 hours, and the time difference is 4 hours. And yeah, it's the same kind of jet lag. It's exactly the same problem. So I'm jet lagged. Right now, my body is telling me it's 8:30 p.m. And it's still light outside because it's only 4:30 p.m. here in San Francisco. So yeah. Anyway, so if I'm a little slow, then that is my excuse that I'm just a little jet lagged. Anyway, I thought we'd talk about a couple of things. We're going to take it a little light today. I don't know how long the show will go. We'll see. A lot of it depends on, of course, you and how many questions you asked. Super Chat is open, so feel free to ask questions about anything in the Super Chat related to the topics we're talking about or anything else. But please use the Super Chat both to support the show, to ask questions, to shape the show, to tell me what I should be talking about. Put your money where your ideas are. There we go, where your ideas are. So yes, please use it to support the show and to keep us rolling. And yeah, it's still warm today. I think tomorrow's going to be rainy and chilly, and then I leave. So this is going to be a very short trip. Although I'm doing a debate tomorrow night. If you'd like to come to the debate tomorrow night here in San Francisco, I'm debating religion, I think, something like that. So you're welcome to come. Information about it is on the website, yaronbrookshow.com. And you can scroll down and you'll find information both about the event tomorrow night and the event Thursday night in Denver, in Colorado Springs. So both of those events are, I think, open to the public. So please come. I think they're both going to be very well attended. So I expect over 100 people in both, maybe much more than that. We'll see. So join us. All right. So, in the wake of Mamdani's victory, and really in the wake of also kind of the direction young Republicans are going, and just youth generally, the kind of angst that seems to exist among young people, among Generation Z, as they call them. There seems to be a huge amount of angst within this generation. We constantly hear about an affordability crisis. They can't afford a home. They cannot afford. Groceries are going up. Everything costs more, and they have a huge amount of student debt. And if you believe the stories, they are really, really struggling, and they're convinced that they are really, really struggling, and they really, really have it hard, and that every generation before them had it easier than they do. And they are voting appropriately. They're voting to shatter the status quo that they feel has betrayed them. This is also a remember generation that were teenagers during COVID. So COVID had a profound impact on their social life. It had a profound impact maybe on how quickly they kind of got rolling into life. And they were locked down. They were isolated, at least some of them, some of the time. So there's no question, this is a generation that has been slapped on the side of the head by COVID and by COVID restrictions in significant ways. And I think a lot of that shapes their attitude towards what's going on now. We've talked about this before on several times on the show. That the reality is that they really feel like they're not doing well. Their statistics, I haven't really found a good source of statistics for this, but I've read some statistics that say many of them graduating college are not finding jobs and they're unemployed, so there's a huge unemployment rate, although the unemployment rate in the economy generally is quite low. And they just feel like the opportunities are not there. The opportunities that everybody else had are not there. And there are a number of intriguing issues around this. One is that if you actually look at the data, there's no evidence of this. I can't really find evidence of massive unemployment or unusual unemployment rates among college graduates from this generation. If you look at income, then this generation has more income than any adjusted for inflation, adjusted for cost of living, adjusted, how we adjust for inflation and cost of living in economics. But this generation makes more money in income than any generation before it at the age that they're at. So they're in their 20s, and in their 20s, no other generation made as much money as they did. And you can adjust the numbers and play around with it and change it, and it doesn't change. I mean, the gap, the amount changes a little bit as you look at it from different angles, but basically each generation, when they have a job, they make good income. All of that is adjusted for inflation, so the fact that everything is more expensive is true. But even when taking account everything is more expensive, they still make more money than any other generation at their age. So partially it could be that they grew up with expectations. Now housing is an issue. And over the last 4 years, the average age of first-time homeowner has gone up significantly from about 33 to 37. And part of that is a spike in home prices in some parts of the country, and of course not everywhere. In places like Austin, Texas, prices have come down over the last year or more. But more than that, it really reflects the fact that interest rates are high. Again, high, God, interest rates today, mortgage interest rates today are lower than when I bought my first house in 1995. My mortgage was interest rates was much higher than what it is right now. So interest rates are high relative to what they were a few years ago, relative to what they were in the 20-teens, relative to what they remember. And people are convinced, for some reason, that interest rates are going to come down in the future. And as a consequence, I think people are waiting to buy a house. They don't want to lock themselves in for now into high interest rates, high monthly payments, when interest rates might come down. Everybody says they're going to come down. Donald Trump promised that they would come down. So there's a sense in which they're sitting and waiting for those interest rates to come down. So the fact that home ownership average age has spiked up over the last 4 years, we'll see if this is a blimp or if this is a permanent change. It also has to do with getting married later and a lot of other things. But it's it really is. The phenomena of what they're saying does not appear in the data. Now people say, well, but they have a lot of student debt. And they do. They have a lot of student debt. But they've got good jobs. And if you look at their net worth, it's not worse than the net worth of past generations. Now, I think student debt is probably the biggest issue here, more than housing, even though what almost everybody mentions is housing, what everybody names as housing, because housing is such a big deal and people take it so seriously and it's so important for people. But I think at the end of the day, in terms of actual cash flow and in terms of how wealthy people feel, I think student debt is a huge burden on Gen Z, and it makes them feel a lot poorer than they really are. They can handle the debt because they're making good money. They also, in terms of wealth, they might feel like they're missing out because the last few years have been so good in the stock market, and people in the stock market have done so well. It could be that that a lot of Gen Zers are looking at how much money millennials, but certainly baby boomers have made on the stock market, and they're going, well, we missed that opportunity. We didn't get that opportunity. We're not in a position to save a lot of money right now at the beginning of life. Nobody is. And they resent that. But there's one thing that's very, very clear, and that is there's real resentment. There's real angst. There is a real challenge out there among young people. They really, really do think that they're screwed. Now, I think this is also the first generation that's really been brought up on climate change is going to kill us all, the world's going to end, America's a horrible place. So I think there's a certain level of pessimism that is built into this, right? That's built into it because of the way they've been raised, because of expectations created about things are terrible, things are horrible. There's a real pessimism, and and then when they get into the workforce, they see baby boomers doing really, really well, which they are. And for some reason, there's resentment, even though, again, baby boomers, when they were their age, same age as Gen Z, didn't do anywhere near as well, not only in terms of income, but in terms of, just think about, they lived in smaller houses, they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have computers, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have flat screen TVs, they didn't have a lot of things that we just take for granted today, and Gen Zers just take for granted, and they see all the money that boomers have made in the stock market. But there is one other thing that really is an issue that maybe is not at the surface yet, but as we move into the future, as the next few decades, is going to become more and more of an issue. And that is maybe that the Gen Zers have some realization of the fact that they, over the next 20 years, are going to be massively subsidizing baby boomers' retirement. I mean, we live in a very, in a sense, strange world. We massively subsidize old age. We redistribute more money towards old age and towards poverty than towards any other thing. Indeed, the greatest beneficiaries, in quotation marks I put beneficiaries, of the welfare state in America, at least, are not the poor, but the old middle class, elderly people. Social Security, they get Social Security. Now, Social Security is their own money. They put it in. But that money was spent a long time ago. Right now, when you draw Social Security, you're drawing it from the tax money that people younger than you are paying in. There's just no other way around it. That's the reality. Young people pay taxes because they're working. Old people who are retired withdraw that. Now, it's been going on forever, but the baby boomers are such a huge generation. It's going to take a lot of Gen Zers and millennials and whatever the next generation after Gen Zs are. They're going to have to work really, really hard and be taxed really, really high. And they're inheriting a massive debt that they're going to have to pay in order to pay all the benefits, Social Security among them, that baby boomers are taking out of the system. And then, Social Security is not as bad as Medicare. Because Medicare everybody paid very little into the system. Again, that money was already spent. And now, for every dollar somebody put into Medicare as in the form of payroll taxes, they take out anywhere between 3 and 4. Much of that in the final year, 6 months of life, which is ridiculous. They spend huge amounts of money. And again, that money is coming directly from the grandkids and the great-grandkids. It's coming directly from younger generations who are still working and who are paying into the system huge amounts of money that is going to fund healthcare, socialized healthcare, by the way. No wonder the younger generation is, both left and right, is sympathetic to the idea of socialism when they can see that their money is going to pay for socialized medicine for their parents, really for their grandparents, So, part of I think the resentment, part of the frustration, part of the angst that exists among young people today, financially and economically, is not objectively about their status today and how much money they make and the kind of jobs they have and so on. But I think at some level they realize that they have been, they're the kind of, maybe the first generation who have inherited a massive amount of debt, a debt that will only grow because they will continue to pay relatively high taxes. But those taxes are not going to be enough to pay for all the benefits that not they, but previous generations have promised the baby boomers. The baby boomers maybe promised it to themselves. I mean, the unfunded liabilities of the federal government are well excess of $100 trillion. So maybe we have debt right now in the books of $37 trillion, growing at about $1.8 trillion a year. That $1.8 trillion adds up to over $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare that is not coming in from payroll taxes. That has to be paid from regular taxes that young people are paying because they're the ones working, and older people are working less. So I think young people should be worried about their future. I think they should be worried about how they're going to pay for all this. And add to that the economic uncertainty that's being created by artificial intelligence, by technology more broadly, but artificial intelligence and robots. And nobody really knows. Now, I'm very optimistic, and I've talked about this, and I think other people are. Economists generally are pretty optimistic that something like AI will create more jobs than it destroys. But we don't know exactly which jobs. We don't know what the time frame is. We don't know how it's going to evolve. We don't know how it's going to play out. No economist does. And I think a lot of young people are feeling the angst of that kind of uncertainty. What is their job going to look like in 30 years? How are they going to make money in 30 years? And they better make a lot of money because they're going to have to pay a lot of taxes in order to fund all the liabilities that their grandparents are spending. And I think a lot of them think that they won't get any of that. And that, they probably are right. Although I remember being that age and also thinking, there's not going to be anything left in Social Security and Medicare for me. Now, luckily, economic growth and massive debts have sustained Social Security and Medicare. But, I don't know where it goes. So, I think there's real reason for young people to be worried, in particular given the fact that they get no leadership, they get no guidance. Imagine a mature politician, a real politician, who actually engaged with this and said, look, this is the reality, this is the debt, this is what has to happen. We're going to have to reform Social Security and Medicare. We'll take care of the people that have no other option and that we promised to take care of. But we're going to phase this out, and we're going to lower benefits. I mean, immediately they should be increasing retirement age. It just doesn't make any sense to as people live longer and longer to keep the retirement age at the same place, and again, force young people to subsidize old people's retirement. It's just insane. At the very least, raise the retirement age. And I think they will. I don't think they have any choice. And ultimately, these programs need to be phased out. The idea of crippling the youth with debt so as to keep people alive a few more years, or a few more months, or a few more days, or a few more hours is absurd and ridiculous and morally, I think, perverse. But this is what happens, and this is the essence of a mixed economy. Because what happens? We can vote other people's money away. We can decide how to allocate other people's money. And, there's a majority that thinks, we're getting old. We want to be protected in old age, so we're going to vote ourselves in all these benefits. And they do. And, when the economy's doing well and there's plenty of young people and the baby boomers in the peak earning years, then it seems great. It seems like, wow, this is what a deal financially. And then you get to the point where they are now all retired. There's still a massive voting bloc, so you can't take it away from them. Because if you take it away from them, you're out of power. They'll vote against you. This is why I think Donald Trump was very clear that he was and both parties are very clear, not touching Social Security, not touching Medicare, because we don't want to piss off old people, because they vote. So, and then you've got a block of young people who are getting screwed, but young people don't vote that much. Old people vote by much higher proportion than young people. They're not that engaged. They don't know what's going on. And by the time they will be more engaged and know more about what's going on, they'll be middle-aged. And by then, they'll have paid into the system and they're going to expect to get Medicare and Social Security and all the goodies later on as well. So they have no incentive later on to vote it out because they paid into the system now, so they expect to get it. And you can see how, once you make this democratic, who gets what gets determined by who can muster the biggest majority, who can play to the hearts of more people, to pull their heartstrings, who can appeal to altruism more effectively, more than anything else. So, this I think is a real situation and a real manifestation of the mixed economy and a real manifestation of the welfare state. And I think young people are legitimately struggling with this. Our economy is more regulated than it was 20, 30 years ago. The taxes maybe are not as high, but they're going to get higher. There's no question about that, because the debt has to be paid off, and if they don't get higher, then we get inflation. Either way, they're screwed. And then, and they know it at some level, but there's not enough of a voting bloc. There's not enough people who will vote to make any changes. So change is basically impossible. Change is basically impossible. To make change, to make real change, you need a real philosophical, ideological revolution. You need to really change people's minds. But how do you do that when you've got a population of 350 million people, most of them are not engaged, and certainly not engaged at the level of ideas, and they have no motivation and no incentive to change. So, Lone Dissenter says, so much for Yaron, trying to keep it lighter today. So we're kind of stuck in the spiral. It might have to collapse before it gets better. It might, the U.S. might have to go through a period of really bad inflation or real bad, like a Great Depression type thing, where you need a kind of melee to come forward and really revamp everything, and where, if you will, people are willing to be radical because they don't see an out with the status quo. And I think that some of these young people who are gravitating towards socialism on the left and fascism on the right, and we'll get to the fascism on the right in a minute, some of these people, this is exactly what's happening. They view the world as, they view the past generations and what they've been left with as a massive betrayal. They think the system as it exists today is completely corrupt, and in many respects they're right. They think that the economic game is rigged against them, and in many respects they're right. And they want to blow it all up, and they want to blow it all up in the form of socialism, or they want to blow it up all up in the form of fascism. But that explains why, and many of them are nihilists. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. I mean, many of them are just nihilistic, and that's ultimately what motivates them or what drives them. So if we look at the election like in New York and other places, it's driven by a real phenomena. And I don't think it's driven by a commitment of massive numbers of people to socialism. I think it's driven by people giving up on the status quo, giving up on this version of the mixed economy, giving up on what's happening right now. And it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. I really don't know. I don't know how you navigate away from where it is right now. Right? So, I mean, they're creating disasters for themselves and for everybody else by moving towards socialism and fascism. This is not solving anything. It's creating a lot of problems, but exactly how that plays out, I don't know. All right, just to remind you, value for value, if you're listening, if you're watching now on YouTube or Twitter or wherever, you can support the show. You can come over to YouTube and support the show. You can do it with a sticker, or you can do it with a question. We have a goal of $250 an hour. We've done amazingly well so far this month in making those goals, in getting to where we need to be. You need to do the same today. Don't let it up. So we need another, about 150, $175 to make the goal for the first hour. So stickers, questions, $20, $50, $5, $2, $1. Value, trade, value for value. Couldn't do this without your support. All right, so I thought I'd do that. I mean, at some point I'm sure we'll come back to all the graphs about how Gen Z, kind of based on the numbers, just the pure numbers, is doing quite well, but is obviously struggling in other areas, and obviously frustrated and angry and is interested in going in a completely different way, completely different direction. Right. Oh, one other thing to note about this is that the other thing that must be frustrating for Gen Zs, and maybe again the attraction of Mamdani in New York, is the fact that everybody around them who is in a position of political power in particular is getting pretty old. I mean, Trump is 79. Biden, what was he, 80, 81, 82? And you could tell how old he was. Trump is old, and you can tell that he's old. Cuomo was not a spring chicken. If you look at Congress, the number of congressmen who are over the age of, over the age of 65 is at record highs. It's never been anywhere close to this. I mean, if you look at the Mitch McConnell, if you just look across the board, what's her name, just retired, Pelosi, who's 80-something years old. I mean, these people, they get into Congress, and they stay there, and they never leave. And they don't have the pride to leave at a peak, to leave when they're still strong, to leave when their mind is still working. They all deteriorate pathetically and have to be, in a sense, wheeled out. And it really is, you get the sense this country is being run by a geriatric ward of a hospital. And if you look at Congress, it is. I mean, the average age of Congress, the number of congressmen who are over the age of 65 is astounding. It's just astounding. And again, I think that alienates young people to think that these old guys and gals are making decisions for them, and these old guys and girls are making decisions that seem to help other old people and not help young people. And I think that's overwhelmingly true. All right. So we've had a few weeks now, I think, of real angst, real challenges, real struggle, fighting on the American right. It started in the aftermath of Charlie Cook's murder, with disagreements on how to respond. Then we saw the leaked text messages from various young Republicans using anti-Semitic, racist, anti-women, pro-rape, just ugly language in the text messages. And we talked about that. And of course, Nick Fuentes has been in the background constantly. Some would argue that Charlie Cook was kind of a bulwark against Fuentes that kept Fuentes marginalized. I don't know if that's true, particularly given the direction Charlie Cook was going in. But Fuentes was at the fringes building an audience, building a huge, massive audience and having massive influence on young people. Tucker Carlson has been drifting on the right to wacky, to craziness. And we saw that happening over time. And then, of course, we got the Tucker Carlson interviewing Nick Fuentes, which kind of blew up the right. I mean, the disagreements among people on the right about this, about what was going on, about different factions of the right, was amazing. I mean, the extent of it and how seriously it was taken. And then, of course, Heritage came out and supporting Tucker, and then had to retract it, and all of that. And again, people everywhere taking sides, and Ben Shapiro coming out against all of them, but Ben Shapiro being marginalized. And of course, in the background of all of this, there is a real, if you will, philosophical, maybe philosophical is too giving them too much credit, but a real ideological struggle going on the right. There are the kind of traditional historical conservatives, the Buckley conservatives, if you will, the conservatives, the Reagan conservatives. There's that, if you will, wing of the Republican Party, many of whom feel alienated from the Republican Party because of Trump, and who rejected Trump, and many of whom hate MAGA, and they're kind of but they have become a marginal force. There are not many of them. They don't have any real institutional backing. Maybe the American Enterprise Institute, I don't know enough, but certainly people at the American Enterprise Institute are part of this. And then there's the Dispatch, and then there's a few other places where they are. But they're clearly on the outside looking in to what is really going on within the Republican Party. Within the Republican movement, there are these various intellectual, ideological, emotional kind of trends, movements happening. You've got MAGA, which is not particularly intellectual. It is a combination of conspiracy theories, a combination of adoration of an individual, Donald Trump, and those intersect sometimes, and there's sometimes opposition. So they sometimes Trump shapes them, sometimes they shape MAGA, or MAGA shapes Trump. But generally, Trump, MAGA, that is kind of one side, not very ideological, willing to go any direction Trump wants to go, motivated more than anything, as we've talked about many, many times, by anger, frustration. Now these, in MAGA's, at least historically, more old people, frustration, anger, resentment, and a lot of xenophobia and racism. But, you know, they often keep the xenophobia and racism under control, and what you know, they don't actually use necessarily xenophobic or racist language. They blame the immigrants, and they always blame illegal immigrants, even though they hate all immigrants. It's illegal immigrants, and they always couch it in ways that gives them an escape valve from the accusation of racism. Although their attacks on Indians, in particular, have been pretty brutal, pretty ugly, and pretty clearly racist, without, you know, and they've not hidden that. But it's not intellectual. It's anti-intellectual. It's a negation of any ideas. It's basically driven by the emotion of fear, hate, you know, is driving them. And it's a very, very tribal movement. On the intellectual side, well, okay, so that's MAGA. And then you've got what's called groypers, right? This is the Nick Fuentes people. And these are people who are, if you will, MAGA on steroids. Again, anti-intellectual, no ideas, really no ideas. This movement is purely nihilistic. MAGA is borderline nihilistic. Groypers are completely nihilistic. They want to see the world burn. They're very similar to the Antifa on the left. They're very similar to the far left. They want to see the world burn. They want to destroy. They very much, unequivocally, resent boomers and millennials and previous generations, and they hate them, and they resent authority, and they resent expertise. How big the movement is hard to tell. I mean, Nick Fuentes has 1 million followers, but it's hard to tell how many people. But it's young people. Whether it survives past their mid-20s, I don't know. If there are any people older than that. But it seems that there are. Actually, there are. We'll talk about that. But this is an explicitly racist, explicitly sexist, explicitly anti-Semitic, explicitly hateful movement. And it is growing. It has energy. It's exciting, and it has a clear leader, Nick Fuentes, who drives them, who motivates them, incentivizes them. And even a lot of them will not agree with everything Nick says. They love him. He's funny, or at least they think he's funny. He drives them through kind of a sick, cynical. Let me know if there's any disconnects. Looks like the chat came back on. Let's see. All right. And of course, they take what MAGA says about immigrants, and they're not shy about insulting them. They're not shy about talking about their color skin. They're not shy about being out and out, unequivocal, explicit racists. And then there were people within the Republican movement who are trying to be more intellectual about all of this. They agree with MAGA and Fuentes in a sense that the current regime, the current way of which things are running in America is unsustainable. That the left is completely out of control. The left controls the institutions. It's dictated the institutions. And something needs to change, and something needs to be done that is dramatic. These people, like MAGA and Fuentes, I should note, both MAGA and Fuentes consider themselves very much Christian, right? Christianity is the only ideology that you can identify, because otherwise they're anti-intellectual. So they associate themselves with Christianity. These more intellectuals are very much committed to a Christianity as theology, as ideas, as a driving force for their ideology. These are the new American conservative intellectuals who are fed up with the modern state. They're fed up with the modern world. They think it's corrupt. They think it's disgusting. They hate the sexual revolution. They hate modernity. They hate technology. And they hate change. This is what Ayn Rand called the divine right of stagnation. They want things the way they used to be, but they're intellectual about it, if you can call it intellectual. These are people who sit at Heritage and sit at this other organization that I'll talk about in a minute called the ISI, the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. They're the people who lead the integralist movement, the Christian integralist movement, which is a Catholic movement that believes there should be no separation of church and state, and that the state should basically impose morality on all of us. Oops. 1 second. 1 second, guys.
Hello, Mister.
Yeah.
This is for you.
Oh. Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you. All right. I thought they were coming to complain about the noise. Instead, they brought me chocolates, which is nice. The hotel, recognizing my status, has brought me chocolates. Anyway, so these are integralists. We've talked about integralists. This is Patrick Deneen and Vermeulen, the common good conservatives. These are people who want to turn upside down the founding of America and turn it into a Christian, collectivist, common good enterprise. And the thing they hate the most, and this is important, the thing they hate the most, the thing they despise the most, is individualism. They reject individualism through and through. They view individualism, they associate with the left, they associate with subjectivism, relativism, and it's the one thing they despise. Anyway, they are kind of in the background, and they are the intellectuals trying to build an intellectual framework for whatever's coming next. And they call themselves, it's them, the Christian conservatives and the national conservatives, tend to be the more intellectuals, and they call themselves the post-liberals. They consider the existing order a liberal in the sense of liberty, liberal in the sense of individualism, liberal in the sense of classical liberal, and they're the post-liberal order. They love Putin. They particularly love Orban in Hungary because he hasn't started a war, but they admire Putin and they admire Orban. These are leaders who declare themselves as Christian leaders. These are leaders who are strong. These are leaders who don't let things like the legislature or the courts stop them. They reshape the court. They reshape the legislature. These are leaders who have crushed independent media and made the media subservient to their agenda. So they love, that's the kind of leaders they want. That's the kind of leaders they would love Trump to be. They are huge supporters of Trump because he gets them close to that, but they would like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is their candidate because he is and has been forever, has been for the last year or two, because he is both smart, intellectual, who believes in his ideas, and is like them. He's much more intellectual. Trump is nothing. Trump doesn't believe in anything. J.D. Vance believes, and they support him. So that's kind of I think some of the map. I mean, there's a lot more we can say about this, but there's some of the map in the background. Anyway, there's a crisis now around within the conservative entities about two things. One is the Goipers and MAGA kind of taking over, and young people being attracted to anti-Semitism. And what do you do about that? And of course, Tucker Carlson being a central figure within the conservative movement. And how do we deal with Tucker Carlson, given that he is both an anti-Semite and platforming these really, really horrible people? But there's also a problem of the institutions, the think tanks, being taken over by these post-liberals. I think it's clear that Heritage has already been taken over by them, and the old kind of conservatives, or the people who still held on to kind of the ideas of the founding fathers, of conservative but individualistic, of free markets. Those people are all leaving and don't have a home. And now it's hit this other entity called the ISI, the Institute, ISI, Intercollegiate Studies Institute. Now, ISI has always been more religiously conservative, always. But it's an organization founded by William F. Buckley. Funnily enough, I think originally it was called something like the Individualist Institute, and Buckley changed the name because he opposed any institute having individualism in the name, in the title. This is William F. Buckley. But they consider themselves old-style conservatives, very religious, but believe in the founding principles, believe in the founding fathers, believe in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, believe in free markets, believe in the institutions of government as they exist today. They're not post-liberal. Anyway, today, a number of board members of ISI resigned and issued a letter, announced, open letter to the conservative movement, it's titled. And I'm going to read you parts of it because I think it's indicative of this ongoing battle, which I think is going to be won by the post-liberals. I don't think there's any question about that. And then the question is, the Republican Party is going to become, at least intellectually, and in terms of activism, much more racist, anti-Semitic, nationalist, and statist. The one thing they all have in common is they're all statist. He says, this is the letter. The battle for the hearts and soul of the American conservative movement is being fought on many fronts, with the latest trench warfare occurring in the boardrooms of its long-standing and most influential foundations and think tanks. The recent controversy at Heritage points to how conservatives, venerable institutions, are being infiltrated and quietly taken over by a tight-knit fringe group of post-liberal thinkers who believe America has been off the rails since the founding. In their minds, the Declaration and Constitution must take a back seat to usher in a new post-democratic, post-capitalist economic system that adds Carlson than President Trump's agenda. This is them trying to suck up to Trump, I think. As a longtime board member and leader of ISI, the oldest conservative campus organization in America, founded in 1953 by William F. Buckley, we have fought to preserve ISI's longstanding mission from falling victim to a post-liberal hijacking. That battle was lost at a board meeting held last Friday, at the conclusion of which we tendered our resignation. He goes on. He goes on to talk about the infighting. We don't need to talk about that. But he writes, ISI has largely abandoned its on-campus philosophical programming, which equipped future leaders to better uphold American ideals. Instead, it focuses on ideological and political podcasts that introduce audiences to alt-right online personalities such as Tucker Carlson and others who seek to undermine the liberal ideas of the American founding. The foundational shift in ISI's focus was done behind the board's back. Its new Signal program, the podcast project Cosmos, was dropped on X, formerly Twitter, on August 19th, featuring post-liberal icon Patrick Deneen. We've talked about Patrick Deneen many times from that Catholic university in the middle of the country. It'll come to me. And neo-reactionary Curtis Yarvin. Now, Curtis Yarvin, I haven't really done a whole show on Curtis Yarvin, but Curtis Yarvin believes America should be a monarchy. He is a real hater of capitalism. He's a real hater of America, of the American system of government. Again, he believes in kings. That I guess there's a mechanism to get rid of them, but he has a whole thing. He's really, really popular in Silicon Valley, but he's clearly a postmodernist. He clearly a post-liberal. He clearly hates the founding of America, the individualism of America. I mean, and this is what, for example, he wrote: if Americans want to change their government, they're going to have to get over their dictator phobia. So he's quite open to a dictatorship. I mean, this guy's a real piece of work. And he's huge in Silicon Valley, He's very influential people like Andreessen and Thiel and others within the Valley. Anyway, Curtis Yarvin is now involved, but here's ISI, a very conservative, in a negative sense, a very religious organization that you would think would be right in line with the changes in the conservative movement. No, it's shifted. It shifted now. It's shifting to adapt to the new world. Let me read a few other things. Yarvin, this is Curtis Yarvin, is a self-described neo-reactionary, unapologetic monarchist, and a leader of the Dark Enlightenment movement who advocates for rebooting and replacing liberal democracy. He writes, yeah, that's what I just read you, the one about the phobia. He also said, although I'm not a white nationalist, I'm not exactly allergic to the stuff. Rather than peeling away disaffected young males who flock to noxious ideas of Fuentes and Yarvin, ISI's Project Cosmos fawns over their anti-liberal philosophies. They appear to be successful in appealing to Yarvin, Fuentes, Carlson echo chamber, as Project Cosmos reported that their video garnered 6 million views on X, 6 million, with a skewing of more than 90% male. What is unclear is how many women and other traditional ISI students, professionals, alumni, and donors are turned off by ISI's celebration of the odious and un-American ideas espoused by Yarvin, Fuentes, and Carlson. Traditionally, ISI's mission was to teach American ideals to curious students on college campuses. The mission of helping students search for truth is now replaced by the post-liberals' lust for political power in Washington. The Heritage Foundation and Hillsdale College are not the only pillars of modern conservative movement to subsidize TC network. This is Tucker Carlson's network. Carlson was the headliner of ISI's gala 2 years ago, and this year, one of its 75,000 annual fellowships went to the Tucker Carlson network. So everybody's subsidizing Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson's raking millions off of all these conservative foundations supporting him. What happened at Heritage and ISI in recent weeks underscores how a cadre of post-liberals has worked together behind the scenes to wrest control of conservative institutions from actual conservatives. They have quietly filled boardrooms with post-liberals, integralists, and other fellow travelers who disdain traditional conservative central tenets of free markets, limited government, individual liberty, and personal responsibility. If only those were the real tenets of conservatism, if only they were grounded on a proper philosophy, maybe they wouldn't be so easily undermined by these nutcases. Continue. These usurpers of conservatism, as Yarvin puts it, find America's core principles to be historically leftist and prevent the right from defeating the left both philosophically and at the ballot box. The leaders of the post-liberal project continue to be close friends with Carlson, Yarvin, and their ilk, to be open to discussion with the likes of Fuentes and other racists and anti-Semites, and to praise autocrats like Hungary's Viktor Orban. And Carlson even lauds the social values, the values of, I don't know if you saw this, Carlson also even lauds the social values of Venezuela's dictator, Nicolas Maduro, which he did. He said, Maduro's not that bad, he's socially conservative, that's good. They echo Yarvin's call to overcome the fear of dictatorship and relinquish respect for representative government and the checks and balances of that the founders established. Traditional conservatives who believe in America's founding principles and look back at the Reagan Revolution as a step in the right direction need to wake up and understand the battle currently underway. Heritage's founder and longtime ISI chairman Edward Fulner presciently warned in the final article he penned in the National Affairs before his death in this past July, quote, "An existential identity crisis now grips the American right, a political movement once united by commitment to limited government, moral order, and robust defense of America's ideals, now appears fractured, its purpose clouded by populist grievances and ideological drift." He ends with, "We hope all conservatives will choose to fight on the side of William F. Buckley and give no corner to those preaching white supremacy, anti-Semitism, eugenics, and bigotry." Now, what's truly astounding here is William F. Buckley was not exactly a champion. And the conservative movement has never been a true champion of limited government, founding principles, capitalism, free markets, and certainly not individualism. It's just that the new conservatives, these new right people, make the old conservative look like free marketeers, look like founding fathers, look like really good guys. I mean, I'm quoting here, and he's rallying people to William F. Buckley, but William F. Buckley for me is the enemy. But these people are so much worse than William F. Buckley. The Deneen's, the Yarvins, the Carlsons, the Fuentes. And I think it's important for us to understand that without William F. Buckley and his compromise and his sellout and his religiosity and his inability to ground the principles of the founding on reason, it is William F. Buckley that is responsible for the creation of the Yarvins and the Deneen's and the Vermeules and the Fuentes and the Carlsons and all this garbage. It's the old conservatives' failure to actually establish an American philosophy that is responsible for where we are today. So I thought that was really interesting. Another institution, conservative institution, falling, if you will, to the post-liberals, and making a public statement, and that was interesting. Then today, I also read, also published, I think it was today or yesterday. Yesterday, it was published yesterday. Another article, and I know we're going to go long. I thought this would be light and quick and short, and it's going long. I hope I'm not seeing what's happening with contributions. Ooh, we're way behind, guys. We're way behind, particularly given how long this show is going to be. I need your support to keep going. You need to step up to keep us going. Wait a minute, this is not working. What's that? Maybe we're not keeping track of everything. It's better than it looks. Or is it? I don't know. Wait a minute. Kim. Wait, we've got a little bit of a Kim Colt. All right. No, we're doing good. All right. Yeah, we're behind. So please consider supporting the show today because we don't have any of our whales coming in with $100 and $50 and stuff like that, and we're way off target. So we're at our first hour, and we're still short about $80, $79 to get to our first hour goal. All right. So there was another essay published today. And this essay is by a guy named Ron Dreher, who I think I've talked about in the past. Rod, R-O-D. Rod is a supporter of the integralist movement. He is a friend of Deneen's. He is a writer. He's an intellectual. He's written a lot. He's been involved in Republican politics for many years. And at some point he got disgusted by the United States and the state of the country. And he moved. He moved to Hungary. Orban is a hero to him and a friend, and he gets significant support, I think, from the Orban government. He is a fellow at a think tank funded by the Hungarian government to promote post-liberal ideology. And so he lives in Hungary and travels to the United States and traveled to the United States last week to hang out with Orban when he was here visiting with Trump and with Rod's friend and somebody he's very friendly with, which is J.D. Vance. And it turns out they all hang out they hung out in J.D. Vance's house last week, and Rod was there, and he writes about this, and he writes about talking to J.D. Vance, about Nick Fuentes, and everything. And he hung out with Viktor Orban, and they had fun, and they drank, and they ate, and they had a good time. And anyway, but while he was here, he talked to a lot of people in Washington, D.C. to kind of get a sense of how bad are things, how bad is the situation, or what is going on. And of course, he views, right, he's an integralist, he's among the intellectuals, And so he thinks anti-Semitism is horrible, even though Patrick Deneen and a lot of these guys, right, are very friendly to people like Tucker Carlson and very friendly to young people who are very anti-Semitic. They consider themselves above. They're better than that. So while he's a nationalist and anti-founding fathers and anti-liberal, a post-liberal, and ultimately kind of moving towards authoritarianism, he considers himself an intellectual, and Nick Fuentes is kind of scum over there, a really, really negative, bad force. So you want to see how bad the Nick Fuentes phenomena was, and so he went around Washington talking to his various conservative friends, and he has friends in very high places, obviously J.D. Vance being one of them. Anyway, he says here that one DC insider told him that in his evaluation, between 30 to 40% of Zoomers, of Generation Z, I guess, who work in official Republican Washington are fans of Nick Fuentes. And he says that from all the kind of people he talked to, that seems to absolutely true. That people confirm that over and over again, that at least 30 to 40% of kind of young Republicans in Washington, D.C. are Nick Fuentes fans. And then he goes on to write, and this is somewhat funny, but listen to this one. He writes, quote, "If you think being a Christian is some kind of vaccination against anti-Semitism," I had to read that twice, because as I talked about in my show on anti-Semitism, being Christian is like, yeah, Christianity kind of invented it and made it what it was. All right, 1 second, guys. Yeah, I'm coming. Thank you. They won't leave me alone at this hotel. All right, more chocolates, more water. Then Christianity is at the core of what it means to be anti-Semitic. Anyway, if you think being Christian is some kind of vaccination against anti-Semitism, you're wrong, he says. Even young Christians, especially trad Catholics, I learned, are neck deep in anti-Semitism. They even use it as a litmus test of who can and can't join their informal social groups. He says not every DC ZoomCon who identifies with Fuentes agrees with everything he says or the way he says it. What they like most of all is his rage and his willingness to violate taboos. I asked one astute Zoomer what the Groypers actually wanted. He said, what are their demands, right? He said, they don't have any. They just want to tear everything down. So, even the more intellectual parts of this alt-right, far-right movement recognize that there are significant elements within the movement that are just nihilistic. Just nihilistic. And they give, these Zoomers are telling him how it's hard to buy a house and all the economic problems we talked about before and all the economic problems that cause people to vote for Mamdani. This is why they're going. They can't buy homes. They can't afford this. They don't see a career. They don't see a future. And they grew up in a culture, in a country that lost its common culture. Many of these young men, he claims again, are fatherless. And then the police, their speech, because they grew up at a time of woke, their speech was policed. And they were discriminated against for being white, Christian, heterosexuals. And their reaction to that is, F that. Fuentes is a living, breathing illustration of, people willing to revel in transgression, to dare down the pillars of civilization, as he writes, just for the fun of seeing those who had been gate-kept away, being destroyed. I'll quote some more. After the most insightful of these conversations, I thought that if you really want to know what's going on among the leading edge of the political activist young right, you would do better to read Dostoevsky's Demons, which is more about nihilism, than any conservative magazine. And if I were writing a new, no, let's skip that. He says, I talked to one Magazuma, a policy wonk who is a person of color. He is beside himself with frustration over the rise of groipism in his circles, right? This is a MAGA who's upset by the groipers. And within the party. This is the young guy. These idiots don't understand that they can't win an election on white-only platform. They're delusional. There are a lot of immigrants and native-born members of ethnic groups who are natural Republicans and whom Donald Trump won in 2024. Take Indians, for example. If you think they're going to stick with a movement whose leader, Fuentes, denounces Usha Vance as a Jeet, you're crazy. But that's how they think. He says, well, they do want to burn it all down, I was told. And I came away with the feeling that they are only tenuously dedicated to democratic politics. I would say, you, Rod, only tenuously dedicated to democratic policies. Give me a break. I told one very smart and decent ZoomCon who despises the anti-Semitic turn in his circle that I've been hearing that fascism, actual ideological fascism, not the media's idea of anyone to the right of Lindsey Graham, is gaining traction among young white British males. He said innocently, so what's wrong with fascism? He meant it. Not in a challenging way, but in a way that conveyed the sense of, we have to think about this now. We talked about how, disintegration of our culture is accelerating, disintegration from dim, right, is accelerating, and liberal democracy seems impotent to stop it. He went on to explain that if he had to choose between living under left-wing authoritarianism or the right-wing version, it wouldn't be much of a choice. He'd go with the right. So let me emphasize, he says, that my interculture was not cheering for fascism. As our conversation went on, I heard real despair, and well-informed despair, that democracy is going to hold in the West, because the conditions that make for a viable democracy are disappearing. I tell you it was dark, but I kept hearing this over and over and over again, and I conclude that it cannot be dismissed. The inability of us older people, boomers, Xers, and older millennials, to comprehend the world through the eyes of Zoomers is a big, big problem. Another strong theme, while it's important to take clear stand against anti-Semitism in the ranks, there's no way to gatekeep our way out of this. You cannot simply point at the Zoomer and say, thou shalt not, and expect it to work. The problems are too deep and complex. And anyway, they have learned to have no respect for authority. Why should they? And then he talks about the betrayal of the institutions. He says, I could go on. Boy, could I. But you get the idea. Trust in the system is gone. Hell, I share most of these conclusions myself. Yeah. Maybe you're responsible for the ideas that these kids have now taken to their logical conclusion. The difference is that I'm not a nihilist. I don't want to tear it all down, but rather reform it. There are no historical examples in which tearing it all down produced a better, more just, more functional order. The Zoomers don't seem to have any knowledge of history, nor do they care about it. Let's see. He continues, I still don't have the answer, but I at least came away from Washington convinced that the issue of anti-Semitism on the young right is much deeper than I'd guessed. A couple of people, both of whom reject anti-Semitism, spoke plainly about how a lot of this is reaction to how Jewish organizations like the ADL has policed speech critical of Israel and of anything to do with Jews so heavily over the decades that they have caused intense resentment among Gentiles Zoomicons. One man told me that for as long as he has been in politics, any criticism of Israel got you tagged as an anti-Semite, and that was a potential career killer. So his generation has come to hate that and to cease caring about the opinions of Jews. And he goes on and on. I'll just read this. An older friend, another despiser of anti-Semitism, said that we have to find a way to talk about the reality of Jewish influence on American life, for good and ill. I took him to mean basically this: Jews really are disproportionately powerful in American life, and they're not shy about using that power to advance their own interests and the interests of other groups they favor. The taboo against noticing that and talking about that, what that means, is gone with the Zoomers. If you want to fight anti-Semitism, we have to face this seriously. Of course, again, notice how it's all collectivistic. It's all the Jews are influencing. The Jews have an agenda. Now, granted, the other side has their own. This is a long essay. I'm not going to read much of it. Let me see. He writes, but see, the Jews are not the real problem, right? Come on. Here in Europe, it's not Jews that make public life in so many European cities unbearable. In fact, they were the first ones to experience the special pleasure of Islamic harassment and persecution, an experience that is now far more general. They were the canaries in the coal mine. They so often are. So here's his conclusions. He's got many. The Goiper thing is real. It's not a fringe movement, in that it really has infiltrated young conservative Washington network to a significant degree. Irrational hatred of Jews and other races, but especially Jews, is a central core of this. This is evil. If post-liberal conservatism requires making peace with anti-Semitism and race hatred, count me out. Now remember, he's a post-liberal conservative. It cannot be negotiated with because it doesn't have traditional demands. It wants to burn the whole system down. It really does. At the same time, the gatekeepers on the right aren't going to be able to make it go away because they have less power than ever. Dealing with this is going to require great skill and subtlety and courage. This malign movement didn't just appear out of nowhere. There are within it legitimate grievances. And as I keep saying, it emerged in a culture that, per Hannah Arendt's diagnosis, is primed to believe totalitarian things. The left got there first. Which is what I said a long time ago. This is not the case of for about 2 decades, left-wing radicals have marched through the institutions and imposed illiberal, race-based leftist policies and openly intended to discriminate against whites, males, and everyone who dissent. You cannot understand the rise of Goipers without understanding this first. Conservatives like me had hoped that Trump's anti-woke pushback would simply restore the meritocratic status quo. It turns out the Zoom cons don't want that. They want revenge. This has the potential to destroy conservatism politically. In actual existing America, a white nationalist party that demonizes non-whites who would otherwise be drawn to a conservative message will alienate those voters. Even if all whites voted for the white nationalist party, it still wouldn't win. And then he says, it also poses the risk of wrecking the new post-MAGA conservatism, whose natural heir is J.D. Vance, his friend. There will be old-school normies, conservatives like Senator Ted Cruz, he's a normie, who will do their best to hang Fuentes and Jew hatred around J.D. Vance's neck. There are enough living boomers and normie Republicans who would rather vote for suboptimal candidate like Cruz than take their chances with a candidate who, fair or not, has been tarred with the evil of anti-Semitism and race hatred by Fuentes and Carlson. They're really trying to save J.D. Vance here. Anti-Semitism is spreading like a virus among religious conservatives in the Zoomer generation. And he goes on and on and on. It's a long essay. I encourage you to read it, but read it from the perspective of this guy created the problem. He's not the solution. He really is the problem. These are the people who intellectually who advocate for a post-liberal order, for getting rid of, in a sense, our kind of system of government in the United States, for increasing executive power, so getting rid of independent media, for having the courts bow to the authority of the president. These are the people who love Orban. And what's happening is they're looking and they're saying, uh-oh, whoops, maybe we went too far. Maybe the implication of what we did, the young kids are not getting it or not getting what we intended. I think the young kids are getting it exactly. Anyway, this is the right now. This is the right now. It's not a small minority within the right. It's not some marginal piece, ISI, heritage, at the heart of the conservative movement. Tucker Carlson is not a fringe character on the sideshow. He is at the really heart of America, of the American politics today. Again, this is all a consequence of Trump, of Trump's victory. Trump has made, these kind of people, he's made them, he's made them legit. He's legitimized the racist anti-Semites. He's legitimized the nationalists, the Christian conservatives, the religionists. Even though he's probably none of those things, he has legitimized all of those, and his authoritarian way about him has legitimized the whole post-liberal agenda. All right. So just wanted to, keep you posted in terms of where we are with all of this. I know I'm doing a lot of shows on this stuff. I'm doing a lot of shows on this stuff because I think it's really, really important. It's going to shape the future. I think, as I've told you, I think our enemies on the right are ultimately more powerful than our enemies on the left, although I spend a lot of time on the enemies of the left. I'm debating a socialist on Thursday. But I do think the real threat is going to come from the right to America and what it is, for the reasons that I think you just heard. I think this is really, really scary, and I think this is right now should dominate the news. And what surprises me is how little the mainstream media is focusing on this when they should be focusing on it more. It's a great opportunity for the left. Not that I'm trying to promote the left, but it's a great opportunity for the left to show how ridiculous the right is, and they seem not to really be engaging, partially because, look, to their left are the anti-Semites. All right, just as a funny conclusion to this, I thought that it was really appropriate that yesterday Tucker Carlson put out a video of an interview that he did with a guy named Dane Wigington. I don't know what his name is. Who cares? Basically, where the guy went through for well over an hour why, mosquito or something, why chemtrails are real. The stuff that comes out of, when you look up in the sky and you see a jet passing and there's a trail of kind of white stuff behind him, right? That, it turns out, is not what we always thought it was, which is, basically crystal and water vapor it's basically a cloud made of crystal and water vapor that form when the hot, humid exhaust from the jet engine mixes with the really, really cold air in high altitudes. You get these clouds. They're just clouds. That's all they are. Anyway, it turns out they're not. It turns out that they're actually chemicals that the US government, or somebody, maybe it's the Jews, are sprinkling out into the atmosphere to poison us, to change the weather, to who knows what. We don't know. But this is the government. The government. This is real. This is the government's influence. Is trying to force us to breathe this stuff. I mean, they're taking fluoride out of the water, and they're introducing stuff into the air that we are going to be breathing, and so on. And This is all done with the knowledge of the U.S. government. And, of course, part of it is to change the weather, the actual weather. Of course, Tucker also says in the interview, he says that the U.S. government has confirmed the existence of chemtrails. There's no such thing. The government has never confirmed this. This is all BS. It is dumber than a conspiracy theory. It's so stupid. It's so ridiculous. It is, I get it that Marjorie Taylor Greene believes in Jews with lasers and chemtrails, but Tucker Carlson, I guess nothing is beyond Tucker Carlson now. This is what he dedicates a whole show, an hour of a show, a whole show to this. Do we seed clouds to change the weather? Sure, we've been doing it since the 1950s. It's local, and you do it on existing clouds. You don't need chemtrails for that. You just seed them in clouds. Anyway, it's so stupid. There's really no reason to talk about it, other than to point out that this is what Tucker Carlson chose to dedicate a whole hour of his show. So I don't know. I've been trying to discredit Tucker Carlson for a few years now, really making an effort to show you how absolutely pathetic and what an evil, lying, horrible person he is, how you should not support him and not watch his show. I'm obviously not having any impact because his show is still big, but I keep doing it because he has such influence, and people still. Now I think I'm going to stop, particularly with Tucker, because I think at this point, if you haven't got it yet on Tucker Carlson, nothing I say is going to change your mind. I am still worried about the right, and we will still be commenting on the right, both its intellectual branch, the post-liberal integralists, and the national conservatives and the Christian conservatives, and the Fuentes-like groypers, to the extent that they gain more power. We'll talk about them. This is, of course, been big news, certainly since Charlie Kirk got murdered. There is, in a sense, a battle going on right now with inside, on the right, what it stands for. Charlie Kirk kind of bridged all these gaps. He had a foot in all these different worlds. There's nobody like that in existence. Also, remember, part of this battle that's going on the right is a part of the battle for the nomination in 2028. It's part of the are we going to all rally around J.D. Vance or not? So there's a lot going on politically in the background around this, but this is what the right is doing to itself right now is really dominating, I think, the news, and it makes sense. All right, that is, I don't know if that was the news, but that is the Yaron Brook version of the news for this Tuesday, November 11th. So thanks, guys. All right, I'm going to just jump in today to the Q&A. I'll remind you to do a Patreon and to support me monthly. I'll also remind you to do stickers and questions, particularly $20 and above questions, $20 and above. I've got a lot of $5 and $10 and $2 questions. What I really need is $20, $50, $100 questions, and lots of stickers. Stickers you can do any amount. Vahab, yeah, he did 99 pennies, or what's it? $1.30, so £1. Thank you. Wes did $50. Thank you, Wes. Really appreciate that. Eric, thank you. Alan, thank you. Darlene, thank you. Vadim, thank you. Bonnie, thank you. We've got well over 100 people watching right now. Jump in with the sticker at any amount. Cook, thank you. Cook Wilcox, Stephen Harper. Thank you guys for the stickers, but I really appreciate it. Value for value. You listen to the show, you get some value from it. I assume by your behavior, the fact that you listen, you're getting something out of it. Reciprocate in a trade by doing a sticker and showing appreciation. All right, let's jump in with Not Your Average Algorithm. This is what the young are celebrating today. I'm not worried about the political consequences. I'm worried about their inability to think. They feel something is wrong, and so they'll choose anything to replace it. I think that's absolutely right. I think what you have today, and I've said this over and over again for kind of years now, what you've got today is a group of young people who emote. They've learned how to emote. They've learned that emotions are what's valuable. They don't know how to think, and therefore what guides them is emotion. And they don't like the status quo, and they're willing to do what they can to just reject the status quo. And they'll reject it sometimes by voting for a socialist like Mamdani, and sometimes by voting for Trump or something much worse than Trump, which is to come in the future, or just watching and celebrating and laughing and having a good time with Nick Fuentes, which I can't think of anybody more ugly right now. All right, Mark, do you think the show focuses too much on the extreme irrationality of people like, say, Tucker Carlson? I agree it's important to understand the culture, but only in order to advance a vision of the good. If we're interested in reaching the best people, and everyone with a semblance of respect for reason already knows that Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen are, well, what do we gain from spending so much time on them? If Galt said, never think of pain or danger or enemies a moment longer than is necessary to fight them, are we really following that principle and not unintentionally inflating the importance of evil? So I don't know who is we, right? So this show does what this show does. It's a show that comments on the state of politics and the state of the culture. I've promised to do a news show to tell you about what is happening in the news and in the culture. And like it or not, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen, at least on the right, define much of what is happening in the culture and what is happening in our world out there. In terms of that, I find it interesting that there are lots of shows on the right in particular that spend lots and lots of time digging out every little detail of everything wrong with the left and every little cultural phenomena that happens on the left. So I don't do quite as much of that because I think it's being done by, and I think the people who do it, are pretty good at it. There are plenty of people who are constantly hopping and constantly going after the left, and I think it's important to do that. I focus more on the right because I think it's more interesting, and I think that there's a bigger danger, and I think that nobody really does it. I mean, the left does it to the right, but the left is so incompetent, and the left is so irrational that they don't do a good job of it. So my show is dedicated to exposing the irrationality of the right and also the state of the culture, right? What is going on in the culture. All in the context of, and I try to do this, what is right? That is capitalism, freedom, liberty, the founding principles of this country, egoism, and individualism. And it's a news show, and this is the news. The Ayn Rand Institute spends a lot more time, almost all its time, on educational programs to teach the positives, to teach the positive philosophy of how to live a life and what a proper society looks like and so on. So I think we all have in a division of labor society, our own focus. Yes, one of the reasons I focus on all the negatives here is so you don't have to, so you can live your life. I tell you, don't listen to the news, don't get your news from other places, because just come to the show and hopefully you get it in doses that are, going to do less time-consuming and not going to do as much damage as if you had to follow the news and newspapers and watch the news. Hopefully that works for you guys. I don't know. I mean, that you guys have to tell me. And that gives you the time to study positive ideas and work towards those. I try to include positive topics and try to talk about positive things and try to talk about the positive philosophy that we're all guiding interspersed in this. If you watched my show I did on Saturday, where I talked about Fuentes and all this stuff, and I talked about what should be done, there was a lot of positive in there. But yeah, I get it, and I get the fact that some people might find this too much and too much focus on this. I don't blame you, and right now it's in the news. I don't expect to be talking much about it other than if it comes back. I think what's happening right now is historic. Well, let me say this again. What's happening right now is historic. I think this is kind of the moment where the right reveals its true nature. And its true nature that it's going to guide it into the next few decades. So I've been warning about this for 10 years. I've been talking about it for 10 years. And it's actually becoming a reality now. Again, the institutions are shifting towards this post-liberal future. They're embracing the Tucker Carlsons and Nick Fuenteses. And they're embracing the ultimate in irrational ideas like anti-Semitism. I think the more we know that, the more we understand it, maybe next time when there's an election, I won't have to argue quite as, I won't have to be as convincing. No, that's not what I mean. I won't have to spend as much time in convincing you that candidate X is no good because you now have the background. You now know what the right is. And maybe there'll be more and more people who are ready to vote them out. And in terms of, I agree with you that rational people get that something's wrong with Tucker Carlson. They don't always get what's wrong with him. Also, that he's a little wacky and a little crazy. And usually, up until the last week or so, I dealt with Tucker Carlson as like, here's the joke, here's the latest crazy thing Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen did. Because there's no point in seriously addressing what he does because he's so irrational. But he is somebody that still attracts an audience of 1 million people, or over 1 million people. Some of his shows do much more than 1 million people. He's still somebody that is obviously hugely respected on the right. And you can't just ignore a cultural force like his. What we need to do is keep pointing out how irrational it is, not so that you are not attracted to it, but that I'm hoping that you repeat it and that this builds into a kind of a cultural movement ultimately that is anti the kind of emotionalism and the kind of subjectivism and the kind of irrationality that Tucker Carlson represents. It's also quite possible, Mark, that you're right. Spend too much time on it. All right, Liam says, have you been to the Cow Hollow area of San Francisco by Lucas Studios? Just beautiful. A travesty, such a gorgeous city is run by destructive leftists. Yes. I mean, this is one of the 3 most beautiful cities in the world. I think this, Rio de Janeiro, and Cape Town maybe are the 3 most beautiful cities in the world in terms of geographic layout and the bridge and the bay and all this stuff. I think that San Francisco has many, many, many beautiful places. I don't know the Cow Hollow. I mean, one of the beautiful places is the old Presidio. Well, I thought Lucas Studios was the old Presidio. Maybe it's the same place. But there's so many beautiful places in San Francisco. I mean, we used to come here often and just marvel at the beauty of the place. And there are lots of different places you can go up high and see a great view. I've got a decent view here from my hotel. But there's some of the most beautiful views anyway. So yeah, the fact that this city and now New York have been run by leftists and now New York by a socialist is just, it gives you a sense of the state of the world, the conflict between the makers and the takers, the productive and the moochers. I mean, this is one of the most productive places on planet Earth, San Francisco. It's where the AI revolution is happening. And yet, you've got a whole class of people who just mooch off of it. Harper Campbell, will our adaptation into authoritarianism be subtle but constant until nothing is recognizable? I think so. I think it's not going to be all at once. I think it's going to be a slow process. It's already happened. I mean, the amount of stuff we tolerate from Trump, and we tolerated from Obama, and we tolerated from Biden, but even more so on steroids from Trump, I think is unimaginable to just a few generations back. So yeah, I think it's a slow creep. We just don't even. It's a boiling frog. We slowly and we'll wake up one day and we live basically in an authoritarian state. It's what happened to Hungary. To some extent, it happened like that to Russia. Michael says, Mamdani could make it worse than what occurred in the 1970s because now capital is mobile. In the 70s, you couldn't work remotely. In New York City loses 1 million people. State revenue will collapse. I don't think New York City is going to lose 1 million people. Remote work is overstated. I mean, basically, for example, New York banks require everybody to come into the office. Most big corporations now require people in the office. Remote work is gone, at least as the kind of phenomena we thought it would become post-COVID. We were wrong. I was wrong. I thought, yeah, people are never going back to the office. JP Morgan Chase just built this huge skyscrapers in Midtown Manhattan for their new offices, and they're expecting everybody to come to work in the office. I thought that would be dead. It didn't die. So I don't know how mobile all that is. Is JP Morgan Chase willing to give up that beautiful new building and move to another city? That won't be easy for them, and it won't happen quickly. And I think that's true across the board. The people leaving New York will happen, but it won't happen in the kind of numbers that you're suggesting. Not your average algorithm. Will New York City and San Francisco become ghost towns over the next decade? No. San Francisco is booming right now. It's back to pre-COVID. It still has a homeless problem, but there are lots of people here. It's dynamic. The new restaurants are opening. Hotel prices are way up. There was a period where you could come to San Francisco and really stay at a really nice hotel for really cheap. That's gone. So the conference business here in Marconi Center, which is right across from my hotel, is booming. San Francisco is far from dead or even a ghost. It's rebounded from COVID in a way that I don't think many people expected. And much of that is AI. And then the mayor, who's not a radical leftist and who's cleaning it up a little bit. And I think the same thing will be true of New York. Not your average algorithm. The free market movement has done such a lousy job at inspiring significant numbers of young people. Gen Z thinks being an optimistic visionary means being a democratic socialist. Yes. And the alternative is to be either a nihilist of the left and right. Democratic socialists, they pretend they're at least for progress and they're for growth and they're yes in my backyard and they've got positive agenda. But you know what I think a lot of young people in going democratic socialist are, and Mamdani had this positive vision and he had energy and youth. You know, it's much better than kind of the nihilism of the left and the right and the anger and the constant anger and I mean, Mamdani put on a good show. Robert says, have you seen any of CIA torture whistleblower John Kirkow's work? No. I find it tough to see through insights from a CIA officer's experience versus the perpetuating conspiracy theories. I have not seen his work, so I don't know. Sorry. Michael, do you prefer Southern California to Northern California? Yeah, the weather's just a little bit better, but there's no question, and in terms of living, it's easier. But in terms of beauty, there's nothing like Northern California. San Francisco, up into Napa and Sonoma and the Redwood Forests. I mean, Northern California is just gorgeous. Kim, I'm doing my MBA, and it's unfortunate how some of my classes are so anti-capitalism, business, and reason. Yeah, I mean, even when I got my MBA in the late 1980s, it was anti-capitalist and anti-business and anti-reason. It was horrible. So even back then, and I'm sure it's worse now. So, sorry. You should take my class on capitalism, my class on finance at the Peterson Academy to kind of to give you kind of the right perspective on many of these topics. Kim, given that politics is guided so much by emotion and mob mentality, how are we supposed to appeal to reason with these people? It's hard. It's why we're not not growing dramatically. It's why we're not having huge successes. Because how do you appeal to? How do you convince sheep of reason? We do our best, and we try. All you have is reason. There's nothing else. There's no secret sauce. There's no other mechanism. Colt. What saddens me is how young men in my age group have abandoned individual rights. I'm one of the few who remains. I've seen them change in real time. I think that's right. I mean, they've abandoned individualism more broadly. They've abandoned any respect for the individual. They've joined a tribe. They become collectivists through and through. Crypto fanatic. Hassan Paika said the Soviet Union should have won the Cold War. Yeah, I saw that. He's also now in Tiananmen Square posing with portraits of Mao Zedong and doing stuff in China right now. I saw some stuff where he's filming over there. Hassan Paika is the equivalent of Nick Fuentes on the left. I mean, he is a nihilist. Without a question, he's a nihilist. Much more so than many of the kind of democratic socialists. He's not even a democratic socialist. He's just a hater and a destroyer. He is an out and out nihilist. There's nothing to be gained there, just like Fuentes. And he's an anti-Semite, just like Fuentes. But the far left and the far right are the same, and people will flip between the two because they're so much the same. The Nazis gained a lot of members in the 30s, in the 1930s, from the Communist Party. A lot of communists became Nazis because it's the same or very similar. Lincoln says, part one, my biggest worry about a potential upcoming recession is that Gen Z really hasn't experienced a bad economy, and yet they are very radical. If Gen Z, under a relatively good economy, are embracing Hamas and Fuentes, I don't even want to imagine what they do in a bad economy. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell how they'll respond to a bad economy, and it depends how the bad economy manifests itself and what it's blamed on. But yeah, things could get very ugly, given that we've got young people, not just Gen Zs, millennials, and then intellectuals who are completely corrupt, and then political leaders like Donald Trump. It's very hard to tell what exactly is going to happen if we get a significant economic downturn, which looks likely and likelier, but I've stopped predicting them because I'm so bad at it. Michael, will Trump place a permanent U.S. military base in Gaza? Is this preferable to UN doing it? I actually don't think he will in the end. He'll put some kind of military base there, but I think the Israelis will discourage it. The Israelis don't want an American military base there. So I don't think it will be permanent. The UN's not going to do it for sure, and Israel wouldn't let them. You need somewhere to house this international military force that's going to go into Gaza and monitor the ceasefire and disarm Hamas supposedly and all this stuff. And I guess building a temporary military base on the Israel side of Gaza makes sense for that purpose, maybe. But I don't think it's going to be more than that. And I think it's way too early. I think the talks are still pretty early in terms of what all of that looks like. And Hamas shows no indication that they're actually willing to disarm. We will see. Kim says, really excited for your debate tomorrow. You coming to my debate tomorrow in here in San Francisco? That'd be cool. Tomorrow I'm wearing a tie. A tie. They require it. To come to the debate tomorrow, you have to wear a suit and a tie. So I'm wearing a suit and tie. That happens once, maybe twice a year. This year it happened twice because I did a Cambridge debate. I wore a tie, and tomorrow I'm wearing a tie. Not a black tie, a tie. Lincoln, finally making about $100 per article writing for a center-right college website. Glad I can finally start supporting YBS regularly. Thank you, Lincoln. Really appreciate that, and congratulations. That is terrific news. Getting the word out there, doing reasons work, not God's work, but reasons work. Excellent. Dave, what if the people have always been this emotional, and it was the gatekeeper class that kept things from getting out of control? Look at Father Coughlin, for example. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely possible. So in that sense, it goes back to what Ayn Rand said, which basically intellectuals shape the culture. because most people in the culture are emotional and they just follow the leader. And if the leader's good, then good things happen. If the leader's bad, bad things happen. And the important leadership is not political leadership. The important leadership is intellectual leadership. And that's what we need, and that's what we're trying to do. All right, guys, thank you. I'm going to call it a night, and I will see you all, not Wednesday, not Thursday, maybe Friday. Maybe we'll do a show Friday. Yeah, I think there's some truth to, maybe we need to take a break from some of this Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson. As long as there's no breaking news, we won't talk about that on Friday. We'll find other things to talk about. The funny thing is when I talk about economics, when I talk about economic things that are going on, I can't raise any money. Oh, Lincoln says, this is a small thank you for the finance course at Peterson Academy. I got the chance to be a part of filming much better than the current finance course I take at University of Arizona. I'm really, really glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm hoping that I can do some more Peterson Academy courses in the future, and that you can attend them live too. All right, guys, I will see you Friday and Sunday. And if not Friday, then certainly Sunday. Bye, everybody.